Spotlight is proudly sponsored by HEC Media, St. Louis's home for arts, education, and culture.
Daydreams are ways of solving problems.
The most important thing is to help the local people have the opportunity.
You can't write about something like this and not be effective.
Today on Spotlight, the science of daydreaming and how it can help you with your creativity. Plus, journey through time and place with photos at the Art Museum. And then the miraculous survival of a group of overlooked people living in lands that didn't want them. But first, the president and CEO of Carnival Cruise Line, who happens to be from St. Louis. It's Sunday and you're watching the Emmy Award-winning Spotlight. St. Louis's Growing Global 2021 took place virtually last month. This year's keynote was President and CEO of Carnival Cruise Line, Arnold Donald. Donald is a St. Louis native and Washington University graduate who began his career at Monsanto in St. Louis. Donald sat down with Growing Global host Debbie Monterey to discuss running a business in a pandemic, the importance of diversity in employment, and his advice for other companies.
I don't know if there's any other industry that has been more severely impacted than the travel and hospitality industry, where your business literally was shut down for a number of months. Let's talk a little bit about the present and the future as you see it. So where does your company stand right now, today?
You know, it's been devastating. The pandemic has been for travel and tourism globally, just absolutely devastating. With people not being able to socialize, clearly they're not able to travel for an extended period of time. We voluntarily paused our operations at the time, over 100 ships that we paused worldwide. But right now, the present, we're excited. So the present, we're thrilled. We have over 20 ships sailing around the world, several here in the U.S. We have, great demand from consumers. We have great protocols, so we are serving our guests with public health in mind. So we have a ways to go. It's going to be choppy. It's going to be somewhat slower than any of us would like, with Delta variants and other things that pop up around the world related to the pandemic. But we're on the slow march back, and it's thrilling.
One of the things that we love about Growing Global each year is celebrating St. Louis area companies that are doing big things globally. And it's always very impressive. Obviously, the last 18 months, some companies have had to scale back or pivot. Any suggestions or advice that you'd like to give to St. Louis area companies who may have had a tough go of it these last 18 months?
I'd offer some encouragement, and I would say stay the course. For us, we had to make certain we could withstand an indeterminate length of time that we were going to have to pause operations. So we had to get liquidity. And luckily we had a super strong credit rating. We had, at the time, uninhibited assets. Even though we were on pause, we can't park the ships. The ships have to continue to operate. So we had minimal manning on the ships, and they're still out there operating. And so we had a heavy burn rate of, for a period of time, $600 million a month.
$600 million a month.
With no revenue coming in.
And you're still smiling.
And so we had to raise, money. And the other thing is, we had to raise the money virtually. Nobody was in an office. So, weather the storm, prepare yourself to weather the storm. And then the next thing is prepare to come back strong. So during this time, don't waste the crisis. So we looked at every process we had. We continue to do that. And to say, how can we come back stronger as an operating company than we went into this with? So how can we make certain we're poised to take advantage of when things come back, and that we do it in a more powerful way than we were doing it even before this happened?
Well, Carnival Corporation is a huge company, and I think that you also have kind of a unique perspective because you're one of the few Black Fortune 500 CEOs. Has that contributed at all to your attitude, your mission moving forward, and what would you say to some of our other folks watching today who would like to see more diversity in the boardroom or the CEO status?
My entire career, I have found diversity and inclusion to be necessary tools for success. the reality is, in a capitalistic society like ours, communities thrive when businesses thrive. Look at any community, if they had major businesses and they went under, it impacted the community. Education, parks, recreation, arts, everything. It impacts the community. Businesses thrive over time through innovation. If you don't innovate, you become obsolete. You get acquired, you disappear, or whatever. So you have to innovate. Innovation, by definition, is thinking outside the box. It's diversity of thinking. You're far more likely to have diversity of thinking in a sustained way if you have people who are diverse and you're including those diverse points of view. And having diverse people doesn't guarantee it, but it increases the probability. So it's an actual mandate for the long-term success of the company and for the communities to have diversity and make certain that diversity is valued in a way where the thoughts and points of view are inclusive.
Well, we love that you still consider yourself to be a St. Louisan. What's your current assessment of the business climate and our potential growth, and what would you like to see St. Louis doing for the future?
The most important thing in the business community is to help the local people have the opportunity. So social equity, and to make certain that people have the opportunity for education, the opportunity for capital to invest, to build, and to develop things. And then to be an attractive place for people to want to come to. St. Louis has a lot to offer, great still, cost of living and a great environment, but we have to stay focused on providing opportunity for everyone and then making certain we're making it easy for people to come here and experience the great things we have to offer.
Scan the QR code on your screen to see the full interview with Donald, as well as the entire Growing Global 2021 event, or visit hecmedia.org.
You just never know where that spark is going to come from.
You're putting a human touch to everything through the vehicle of art. We give them the ability to hope.
It is said that a mind is a terrible thing to waste. That's why it's good to stay on task and focused. Or is it? This had Marcus Baer's mind wandering about daydreaming.
It originated in a paper that one of my co-authors wrote. He was very interested in mind wandering. And so he created a classification of where the mind can wander to.
Baer is a professor of organizational behavior at Washington University's Olin Business School. Teachers, professors, and bosses have scolded daydreamers. But could daydreaming sometimes be a good thing? And when is it okay to be distracted? For the mind to take us off course.
What's so amazing that keeps us stargazing? And what do we think we might see?
That's what Baer and his colleagues wanted to find out.
The reason why we wanted to study that is because most people believe that mind wandering is counterproductive.
Baer is part of the research team focused on daydreaming as it relates to employees who may daydream on the job.
Because we believe it is productive. If the mind wanders about 40% of the day on average for the average person, the question is it has to have some sort of productive function.
The study found that daydreaming carries significant creative benefits.
Daydreams are ways of solving problems, really. And so imagine you have a complex problem, you keep coming back to it, but it's not really, you're not making progress. Is it possible that the mind is engaged and then drifts to more imaginative content and thereby providing you clues as to how to solve that issue?
Baer says this is especially true for people who identify with their profession and care for the work they do.
Einstein's development of the theory of relativity. It's a beautiful example because he was really struggling with a complex problem. He couldn't solve it, and he decided to give his mind a rest. And he started to daydream. And it was really imaginative content because he thought about bolts of lightning coming down And he was wondering whether or not a person being on a train versus a person observing a train would see the two bolts of lightning hitting at the same time. That's what his mind wandered to. That's the daydream he had. And that gave him an insight into the theory of relativity.
So daydreaming is not just associated with boring or monotonous tasks. Zoning out at work or in the boardroom may not be such a bad thing after all, if it spurs creativity. Baer says the study sheds new light into the power of the mind. But what do employers, teachers, and daydreamers actually do with the information? What's on the other side?
Someday we'll find it, the dreamers and me.
For the full story on the study, go to our website, hecmedia.org.
Scan the QR code on your screen to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.
And this exhibition creates journeys through both time and place, from ancient ruins to medieval abbeys, from the rise of the modern metropolis out into the rural countrysides of America. Architectural photography from the collection, 1850 to 2000, encourages viewers to consider the relationship between physical buildings and their corresponding appearance in photographs. It traces the history of architectural photography through European and American photographers. Photography was invented in 1839, and by the time that we get to the early 1850s, photographers have really overcome a lot of the early limitations and began to really explore creatively what the camera could do. It's remarkable how quickly photography developed, specifically in relationship to a tourist trade early on, so that people could take images home with them and sort of look at them at their convenience. One of the earliest images taken by American photographers in Egypt, taken in 1851, really represents several months of effort to travel down the Nile, to get to the Isle of Philae in the southern part of the Nile, to work in these very unforgiving desert conditions. And we have one of the great examples that they took in perfect condition. We have ruins of ancient architecture moving to the remains of Roman antiquity, to medieval buildings in Europe. And then we get into the rise of the modern city in the 19th century, both looking at what was being built, but also what was being torn down to create something new. And then we move into New York City, which is the quintessential modern metropolis in the early part of the 20th century. But equally important in the 20th century, particularly in America, photographers going out into rural areas, into the countryside, looking at buildings where we don't necessarily know who the architect was, using the automobile as a way to explore and discover what's on a side road, looking at roadside churches or the remains of 19th century storefronts, and how those buildings still kind of resonate and speak to us. One of the more recent developments, particularly in America, focused on the phenomena of suburban sprawl, looking at how we occupy the land and in many cases sort of erase the natural environment in order to put up these new built environments, often through commercial interests rather than anything else. A lot of photographers were grappling with this phenomenon, this rapid reworking of the landscape, and generating images that are both troubling in some ways for their environmental implications, but also amazingly kind of beautiful and captivating in their composition, their qualities of light. The exhibition shows how images started to circulate in early publications, early books and journals, and shows how technologies evolve up through color practices. In the earliest examples of the integration of a photographic image and text on the single page. The photographs had to be sort of hand-tipped into each book, so it was a very labor-intensive process. Just a couple decades later, we have things like stereographic cards that reproduce the three-dimensional qualities of buildings. There are two images side by side that are photographed in separation to equate the distance between the human eyes. Even though these early photographic images were quite sort of fragile, many of these images on paper have actually outlived the buildings themselves. Many of the buildings were destroyed for different reasons, whether it was a fire or an earthquake or war. Through it all, the photographers really have to have this sensitivity to structure, to qualities of light and atmosphere, and strive to find very specific perspectives.
On display through January 2022. Visit slam.org for more info. A group giving classical music a jazzy twist later on Spotlight.
At the end of World War II, over 1 million refugees, including concentration camp survivors, political prisoners, resistance fighters, and Nazi collaborators, were left with no home to return to. The fate of these people over the next 30 years is the subject of acclaimed historian David Nassau's The Last Million, Europe's Displaced Persons from World War to Cold War. It's an incredible history of an overlooked people that continues to shape the current global attitudes toward refugees. David Nassau is an award-winning biographer, historian, and the Arthur M. Schlesinger Jr. Distinguished Professor of History at Cooney Graduate Center. A two-time Pulitzer Prize finalist, Nassau is the author of best-selling biographies of Andrew Carnegie and Joseph Kennedy. For today's conversation, Nassau is joined by John C. McManus, Curator's Distinguished Professor of U.S. Military History at the Missouri University of Science and Technology. McManus is the author of 13 critically acclaimed books of military history with a focus on World War II. Island Infernos, the second volume of McManus's trilogy on the U.S. Army Crusade in the Pacific, will be published in November 2021.
As Americans, we tend to think of VE Day as this triumphant narrative, and the war's over, we've won, and now we move on to this incredible post-war future and all the, and obviously the Cold War sets in and all that. But for most Europeans, the struggle in some ways is just beginning. You have a continent that's been laid waste. Here are these Allied soldiers, almost all of whom have been trained for combat operations and their commanders. And, they're having to transition to occupation duty, but then they've got this huge humanitarian crisis on their hands, and no one more so than the Americans, who have greater responsibilities than the others, it seems. So what kind of challenges are these soldiers facing at that stage?
The soldiers were miserable. All they wanted to do was to go home. They didn't want to serve in an occupation force. They talked about being babysitters. In the beginning, Eisenhower, who is the supreme commander in Europe, and then the head of the occupation army, he can't pay attention. He's more worried that there are going to be Germans who are going to, what are they, you're the military historian, what are they called?
Werewolves.
Yeah. That they're going to come out of the forests or and start sniping at American soldiers. So he's worried about that, and rightfully, he should have been. What happens is that the Jewish refugees are rounded up by nationality. The American forces and the British don't recognize Jews as a separate entity. So if you're a Polish Jew, you're Polish, according to the American army, and you're stuck into camps with Polish non-Jews. The same with the Latvians and the Lithuanians. And that for the Jews was intolerable, because they knew that among them, certainly for the Ukrainians who survived, that their neighbors in these camps might have been the guards in the death camps, or might have been the killers of their families, or the looters of their businesses back in Poland. Plus, when the Jews come out of the last million, they are the sickest. They are the most damaged. Eisenhower goes and he visits the camps. He visits the camps, and he immediately tells his commanders, I want you to make sure that these people are well taken care of, that they get extra rations, that we remove the armed guards, let them police their own camps, that we get Yiddish speakers in there as liaisons with the army. It's a remarkable moment. So yeah, you can't write about something like this and not be affected on a daily basis. But if you're too affected, then you can't write history as it happened. So you've got to maintain that balance.
Scan the QR code on your screen with your phone's camera to find out the lessons NASA says we can learn from these events of the past to help us in the present. You can also watch the full interview at hecmedia.org.
HEC Media. Recognized, celebrated, honored time and again for excellence in the industry. Find all of the award-winning content at hecmedia.org.
We are here at the St. Louis Artists Guild for the annual St. Louis Artists Guild Members Exhibition. The exhibition focuses on our members who work in a variety of mediums. So within the exhibition, you will get to see woodworking, paintings, installation, glasswork, drawings, fiber work, you name it, and it's in the show. Our members are a big part of our organization. Without our members, we would not be here. Our member base helps us pull artists from our community into the gallery so viewers in the area can see contemporary artists right here. And a lot of these artists either help teach here or volunteer with us and help the art community grow. A lot of the artists that are in the show are right down the street from the Guild, or maybe they're a 30-minute drive, but they're easily accessible here. You don't have to jump on a plane and fly to New York, for instance, to catch some of these artists. They're technically in your backyard. Also, artists in this exhibition pull inspiration from right here in the city. So viewers coming in will see artists pulling inspiration from landmarks here in St. Louis, like Forest Park or the St. Louis Arch, and seeing artists pulling inspiration from our community helps bring awareness to the community, but also shows that there's beauty here within our region and can be a great resource for other artists to start creating or pull inspiration to create their own things from. Viewers also coming by the gallery can check out Studio Art Quilt Associates exhibition Spread Your Wings, which focuses on artists within the region using quilt techniques to create wall hangings that are in our entryway. The exhibition is extremely colorful, and you will be blown away by the great techniques quilters use, along with the different variety of concepts that are being developed within the work. Also on display is work by Deanna Rowe, The Ship of Theseus. The exhibition focuses on Deanna's dive into the psyche and how we as individuals can take on different experiences and how that impacts us as humans. So her work dives into these ideas of like trauma experiences or things that happen throughout your life and how those can impact you as a human and your mental health. And she's using different mediums such as encaustics, painting, and layering to create these really nice textures within her work. We are excited for all of you to come check out these awesome exhibitions. All exhibitions are open until October 16th. You can find more information on our website at www.stlouisartistguild.org.
You can find the stories featured in today's show along with past episodes and more at hecmedia.org/spotlight. week, an investigative reporter tells the story of poverty and corruption in Appalachia. Plus, using art to explore identity, desire, and connection. Thanks for watching Spotlight. Join us next Sunday at 9:30 a.m. on KPLR 11.